Hey, Calvary Chapel LBV, Jeremy Couch here to offer you a word of encouragement this week as we approach Good Friday and Easter. I want to share a few thoughts with you from the Last Supper. So you can find the account of the Last Supper in each of the Gospels. I'm going to reference a couple different accounts, one in Luke and one in John. So the Last Supper is when Jesus and the disciples come together to share this meal. It's before he is about to go on to be arrested and ultimately crucified. So this is really their last opportunity together to share in this type of community and to be together and share this meal. And so, they're in this upper room. They're celebrating the Passover, and the meal's prepared, and they're reclining. They're spending time together, and that's one of the first points I want to observe, is that there was community. And so in a time like this that we're in, it's easy to get isolated. It's easy to just be in our own little world and to neglect community, our church family. Not intentionally, it just happens, right? Because of the nature of what we're facing today. But I just want to encourage you to be intentional about finding ways to stay in community, to be creative, and to not forsake that opportunity to connect in some way. So just want to make that point first, that Jesus and his disciples were about community and fellowship and being together. And that is so important to strengthen and encourage one another. The second thing I want to point out is remembrance. Now, at the time, Jesus was instructing them on what they would be ultimately remembering going forward. But that was this opportunity to partake of his body and blood symbolically. He took the bread, he broke it, gave thanks, and he took the cup, shared it, and instructed them to partake in those elements where we would get the symbolism for communion today. So you can find that again in the accounts of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke is in chapter 22, starting in verse 7, and you can read through that and see what took place in that account of Jesus breaking the bread and sharing the cup. And so today we have the opportunity to remember the sacrifice that he made, the sacrifice that he made on the cross as we look to Good Friday, where his body was broken and his blood was spilt on our behalf for the forgiveness of our sins and ultimately to give us freedom, right? We can freely come to the Father. Jesus wiped away our sins if we just come to him and ask for forgiveness. And so we are called to remember that sacrifice, not just to take it for granted, but to be very intentional about recognizing what was done for us on the cross. The third point I want to make is in regards to Jesus washing the disciples' feet, which you will find in John chapter 13. So at the meal, he actually gets up and he goes over and gets a basin and he starts washing the feet of the disciples, which is no small act of service. This was something that was, in that day, that it was very dirty. Their feet were very dirty, so this was not a glamorous thing to do. And so here's Jesus, the Son of God, kneeling down to wash the feet of his disciples. And he goes on after doing this to say to them in chapter 13 of John, beginning in verse 12, after he finished and put on his clothes and returned to his place, he said, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Jesus was reminding them that there is no greater calling than to be a servant. And, in one of the other accounts, they were arguing over who was the greatest. And you may recall earlier in the Gospels that they were having a similar argument. So here he was having to remind them again that the greatest among you is a servant. The Son of Man came to serve, not to be served. So as we think of all this together, the Last Supper, the community they were in, the remembrance of the sacrifice that Jesus was to make, and then ultimately the call to be a servant, that's what we need to take away from this and apply to our lives. Are we in community? Are we remembering the sacrifice that Christ made for us on the cross? Are we remembering that every day and being thankful for that and recognizing that we have freedom because of that? And then are we serving? Are we recognizing that no matter who we are called to serve? And so I just want to leave you with that and hope that that is an encouragement to you as you approach Good Friday and Easter, to be mindful of the community that we have, the sacrifice that Christ made for us, and the call that is on each of our lives to serve.